lecturer at UCL, and I'm co-hosting this seminar series together with Dr. Helen Fisher, who is also here today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the network that is hosting this event, we are actually a UKRI-funded network. We're one of 8 mental health networks that are in the UK. And what we really try to do is reduce the prevalence of mental health in adults, children, and elderly, and bring together different experts in the field. And thankfully, this brings a lot of eclectic group of people together from, psychiatry, health, mental health, social work, history, computer science. And I think this diversity is also reflected in our wonderful speakers today. So I really, want to welcome you to this event and also to encourage you to engage with our network a bit more. We have grant schemes and publish statistics and have a really amazing newsletter as well that I hope you can sign up for. So with that, I want to introduce you to today's third panel, which is looking at how to juggle different commitments. And we kept it rather broad because commitments, every one of us has different commitments, may it be childcare or elderly care or any type of caring responsibility to, perhaps mental health struggles that some of us have, up to, like clinical responsibilities, or simply the day-to-day reality of like having so many open tabs and like so many open projects and how to more effectively engage with them. And it's therefore that I'm really absolutely delighted to have an amazing group of people as panelists today, which I will introduce now in the order that they will be speaking. We have first Bailey Souza. She's Director of Operation and Provost and Vice President at the Peter Ludlow Leadership College at the University of Alberta. She's an entrepreneur and workplace effectiveness advocate. And together with Alex Clark, she's author of the book, How to Be a Happy Academic. And I have to say, I've read the book and I certainly learned a lot of tips and tricks on how to become more effective. And today, hopefully, she will talk a bit about skills, tools, and practical strategies to better cope with demands in modern academia. We then have Alina Morowaska. She's Associate Professor and Deputy Director of Research at the Parenting and Family Support Centre at the University of Queensland. She's joining us from Australia, where it's quite late at night, and Bailey is actually 5 o'clock in the morning, so really thanks a lot for being here from Canada. And Alina is actually, her research focuses a lot on behavioral family intervention. And what really is fascinating about her work is also that she has co-founded together with other people a blog called Mum PhD, which is an online community for women combining academic life and motherhood. So hopefully she can tell us a bit about like how to better juggle research and parenting and caring responsibility. We then have Naima Iqbal. She's one of our members of the Violence, Abuse, and Mental Health Network's Lived Experience Advisory Group. And the League, as we call it, is really trying to connect our academic community with the practitioner community, but those with lived experience, and help to deliver really upon what we try to achieve of make the lived reality of people better. And Naima is a professional lived experience researcher. She's worked in a number of institutions like AVA, McPin, and hopefully she can talk to us a bit better how to juggle research with lived experience of physical or mental health or trauma issues. We then have Roxana Kenya. She's a clinical research training fellow at the Women's Mental Health Network at King's College. And Roxanne's research is really interested in the social determinants of mental health and how traumatic experience influence mental health outcomes. And hopefully she can talk a bit about like how to juggle research and other commitments with clinical commitments that she has on a day-to-day. And last but not least, Zoe Kennedy, who is the Culture, Diversity and Inclusion Lead at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. She works to ensure, that the department is fulfilling its diversity inclusion work, and like also has been involved in the Athena Swan application and also the implementation of their diversity and inclusion plan. So hopefully she can talk a bit about like what universities actually must live up to when it comes to best practices also around helping people better juggle all the commitments that they have. With that, we will start the session by our speakers giving a 7-minute presentation, and then we open up the floor to question and answers from the audience. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat or whenever it comes to your mind, and we will then approach that Q&A session after all speakers had a chance to speak. With that, I'd like to hand over, I don't know if Baby, you want to start, or perhaps Alina. I think I initially said Alina would start, so perhaps Alina, you want to kick off?
Sorry, yes, sorry, that's fine. We were talking about a different order before, but that's okay. So let me share my screen with you so that you can see my slides. There we go. All right, so I guess my topic is on juggling research and parenting. And just to kind of frame things, I'm obviously a parenting research. That's where I've spent the vast majority of my research career in. But I'm also a parent. I've always seen my work and my career as central to identity, but I've also obviously got a number of different interests, hobbies. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, a friend. Like many of you, I wear lots of different types of hats, and they're all very important to me. The challenges of balancing work and family, whether it's academia or any other kind of work, have been explored a lot in the literature. And, you know, there's a fair bit of work suggesting that there's a whole range of things that parents find difficult. Dealing with stress, conflict between partners, work overload, not having enough time in either role. So whether it's the work role or the family role, spending enough time, quality time with children. The sense of guilt of not doing either role as well as one might want to do. Managing all of the housework and daily tasks, leaving work at work, switching off, managing those transition times between home and work and home. All of those things are difficult, or things that parents have identified as being problematic for them. And I think academia can be doubly hard. So think of the stereotyped model of an academic. What comes to mind? I bet you didn't think of someone with sensible working hours, who switches off from work at the end of the day, leaves the office, goes home and doesn't think about their work. You know, academia is one of those things that's very flexible, which is great on one hand, but that flexibility can stretch to encompass pretty much everything. So if you think about it, it's flexible. Here I am at 9 o'clock at night. There's Bailey at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's, you know, a positive in some ways, but of course it can bring its own challenges as well. So I often think that academia is one of the very few jobs where part of their job is really to create more work for yourself. So you reach the end of that research project, you answer the research questions that you posed at the beginning, and then you generate 3 more as a result of that. So I don't claim to have the answers. I'm not going to give you tips based on the literature specifically. I don't have time to go into that sort of depth at this stage, or to suggest that what I've done is going to work for you. But I did have a few tips to share from my own experience and my own life. So here's the first one. Don't work so hard because you only live once. This is actually a quote from my honours supervisor. At the end of my honours year, this is what he said to me, which kind of came as a surprise because it's not the sort of thing you expect from an honours supervisor, but it really struck a chord with me. I was working very long hours, and it kind of struck me that, yeah, of course you need that kind of balance. So I interpreted that as you have to work hard, but also play hard. And it's also about trying to maintain more balance. So I guess the point here would be to work hard when you're at work, but also play hard when you're not at work, and don't work when you're at work. And I try to mostly stick to that. For example, I don't check email, I don't write papers or do anything else work related when I'm on holidays. And I make that very clear to everyone in my working environment. So no one expects me to respond to any emails while I'm away. Academia does lend itself to fairly endless, self-perpetuating work. It's interesting, it's engaging. So I think setting boundaries and limits can be particularly important. And in case you're wondering, Where the photo's from, that's Wineglass Bay in Tasmania. That's when we were switching off at the very end of last year on a hiking trip with my family. So here's my second tip. If you're a parent, I think it's really important to try to involve your children in your life. As a parenting researcher and an observer of families around me, I know that we live in an era of fairly intensive parenting. We tend to invest our time, our money, our energy into our children, which isn't a problem in and of itself. But in a world of endless possibilities, of comparisons, of worries, of anxieties, of ambitions, it can actually create a lot of anxiety, stress, and guilt for us and for us as parents. So I think it's really important to think about, rather than doing things for our children, to think about how we can have our children involved in our lives and what we like to do. So starting with the simple things like helping your children to learn independence skills so that you don't have to do everything for them, involving them in family chores, expecting them to contribute to family life are really important. But also thinking about engaging your children in the sorts of activities that you as an individual or you as a couple, as a parenting couple, might like to do. So rather than setting your life around what you think your kids might want to do or what you think they should perhaps do. As an example from my own life, my children are 8 and 10. We don't do any weekend sport, even though that is very much the done thing in Australia. But what we do instead is like what you can see there in the picture. This is quite a few years ago now, but it's my children climbing Australia's highest peak when they were 3 and 5. So we like to go bushwalking, we go camping, we go bicycle riding. We do all of those things together because we all enjoy them rather than it being centered around just one or two family members. And finally, I think it's really important to learn from your kids. Kids have a wonderful capacity to be in the moment, which as a parent can be really frustrating at times, but has much to teach us. So as a parent, when you look at this photo, do you see the delight in exploring the contents of that bowl, or do you despair at the cleanup effort that's going to have to happen afterwards? Being in the moment, focusing on what's in front of you, not mentally running through that endless checklist of things that you might have to do has lots of benefits for all of us. It's also important to be realistic and talk back to any negative thoughts you might have. I'm a clinical psychologist by background, so you know, that kind of notion of talking back to unrealistic expectations and unrealistic thoughts is really important. I've always got an endless list of projects, both in my personal and my work life. So regularly reminding myself to kind of breathe, to be realistic about what I can actually fit in, to stop, to enjoy the contents of that bowl and to worry about the cleanup effort afterwards, I think is really, really important. Leonie mentioned at the beginning that we've set up this discussion forum, Mum PhD. This is really the brainchild of Dr. Carl Whittingham, who co-founded it along with me and Dr. Amy Mitchell. We're all academic mothers, we're at different stages of our career, but we all recognise that there's really this gap in supporting for mothers who are working in academia. So Mum PhD is an online community for women combining academic life and motherhood. That's now or in the future. So you don't have to be a mum right now to join. We welcome participation from women who are trying to conceive, as well as any women who are kind of considering how they might incorporate future motherhood into their academic career plans. And likewise, we welcome participation from PhD students or any women considering embarking on a PhD. So it's really a safe, respectful environment for sharing experiences, giving and receiving support, exchanging knowledge, tips, engaging in debates, venting, and just finding solutions to any kind of issues around combining academic life and parenthood. I can certainly talk more about that if anyone has any questions, but in order to try to stick to my 7 minutes, I will stop there. So thank you very much. You've got my contact details on there too. So happy to engage in discussion a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alina. That was great. And I bet people will be super interested in learning more about your work and especially hopefully checking out also Mum PhD, which this is how I actually found you because I signed up for it. And it's a really great community for everyone. I'd like now to invite Naima to hopefully speak about her experiences with us.
Hi, do you want us to do it in this order?
Yes, please, if that's okay.
All right, I'm not sure about sharing my screen. Okay. All right, so. Okay, can everyone see that screen? No.
No, unfortunately we can't.
Okay, I think now. Yes, okay. Can you see it now?
Brilliant. Yes, yeah.
Right, okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Lots of amazing speakers on here. I'm just going to speak a little bit about the work that I'm doing now. As Leonie introduced me at the beginning, I come from a place of, basically I've been homeless and I've been through domestic violence and I've suffered trauma. I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. It's something I have to live with right now. So, you know, I volunteered when I was homeless. I got my first place. I've been through hostels and things like that. So let me just get my bearings because we're in the wrong order, sorry. Just gonna set time up. Okay. Yeah, I started volunteering when I was when I went to my first women's centre. I was offered position to volunteer with Ava, researching women that have been through and interviewing women that have been through domestic violence and homelessness and sexual violence as well, and that had suffered mental health and maybe childhood trauma as well, and had maybe drug and alcohol addiction as a result of domestic violence and trauma. And it was really, it was a time for me as an individual for personal growth as well. And it was very validating, and it was also very testing because obviously I had to face my fears, and I was also meeting lots of people, and it was a time where I had to face my fears. Through that, I met lots of people. I went on training. I had a few meltdowns. I had to speak to MPs in the House of Lords. I spoke on Radio 4, people from Agenda as well. The organisations were really encouraging. I didn't even know how to catch a train. There was lots and lots of barriers I had to go through emotionally. Got to the point where I actually interviewed, I had to go around different centres in Birmingham and interview women. I made loads of networking contacts. I met loads of amazing women. Kind of built up my confidence. Personal growth was amazing. Had a few meltdowns and the staff were amazing. They really encouraged me. The isolation that I went through was pretty bad at times, and that really helped me build my confidence through that. Because I was asked to interview 2 people, BME women, I actually interviewed 6, and through that I got offered a job offer with Mutpin Foundation, who are actual research. It's a research foundation based in London, and they actually trained me up, and I actually became a paid. My first job was voluntary, obviously, with Ava, but I actually got offered a job with Mutpin, a contract, 15 hours a week, which works around my physical and mental health problems. And one of the things that I want to talk about was working with research, coming from a place of trauma, is that we have insomnia. People that suffer with trauma, we have bouts of insomnia, and people that want to employ people like myself, they need to understand that. So I can't do 7 o'clock in the morning. I suffer with migraines and things like that. So they had to work around that, and that was amazing because they were really good about that. And if I had a bad day, it didn't matter, you know, I wasn't penalised for that. And in other places that I've worked previously, I have been penalised and I've had to leave work and things, and I've been sacked. So I was really like, that was massive for me, to be honest. And I hope that moving forward, other employees can do that as well. I'm just going to quickly move on to the next slide. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, how we do it differently. When we interview people, when I've carried out interviews now, I've worked with lots of different places, Ava, Agenda. I'm on quite a few panels and things for trauma and things, and I've done lots of, I did a Haringey project where I interviewed homeless women. And the way that I do interviews is totally different. I would think anyway, because I've been there and I've done it and I've been on both sides, I kind of do it very informal. I reassure them. I get to the interview earlier, and because of COVID now, I phone them up earlier. Obviously, I can't do it face to face in this situation now, but I reassure them. I let them know exactly what we're going to do, how long it's going to take, the kind of questions we're going to ask them, if they want background info beforehand, and on the day as well. If they decide that they're not in the right headspace and they want to change it, they want to change the time, we change it. And I let them know if they want to take a break, how long it's going to take, if they've got the spare time, if they're free, and also if they want to scrap the interview, the anonymity, the safeguarding, if they've got someone to talk to afterwards for the, if they get triggered halfway through. And I also let them know that I've been through things as well. So there's no judgments, and we don't have to answer the questions in the order that they want. Sorry, let me rephrase that. We answer the questions in the order that they want. They're in control. We don't have to follow a script. Rip it up, throw it away. And I share my lived experience with them, and we talk about what they want to talk about. Okay, so I feel that I'm more in tune with their anxiety. I hope that that is the case. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship. That's how I kind of like explain it. That's how it feels anyway. That's how I hope it feels. And I find it validating, and I've had feedback from the women, some of the women that I've interviewed, they've asked that they want to keep in contact because they feel that it's been a positive experience for them, because for a lot of the women, you have got to understand it's the first time that they've opened up. I've only got a minute and a half, so I'm going to quickly go on to the next point. When you employ people with lived experience, try to employ them, pay them. We need to, it's great to get paid, because for us, it's a move. It's a positive move forward. It's for us. We're getting employed. We can work. We're able to work. We're not useless. It's a positive thing. And also give us more opportunities once we've in a research project. Let that not be the end of it. Let us be able to be in other research projects moving forward. If there are other opportunities, let that happen. Involve us more. Let us know what the outcome has been. Keep us involved. And I think that's it. And I think we can make a positive change to services. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Naima, for sharing all your experience and also giving some advice on, for employers in this space as well. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome Roxanne, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Naima. That was fantastic. It's a really tough one to follow. I'm just going to try and share my screen with you. Okay. My name's Roxanne Kainajad. I am a clinical research training fellow, which means I'm a trainee psychiatrist, a medical doctor. I work in the NHS, but I'm out of program, so-called, because I'm doing a PhD. The picture is rural Ethiopia, and my PhD is in intimate partner violence and mental health in pregnancy. So tough act to follow, but I'm going to try in 7 minutes to say what I've learned about juggling from this job. My job is a mix of things, which is why I love it. This is the Maudsley Hospital. Sometimes I'm in a psychiatric hospital seeing patients. Sometimes I'm in a general hospital like an A&E seeing patients. Sometimes I'm at King's College London teaching medical students or master's students. Sometimes I'm in Ethiopia doing research, but most of the time, especially now, I'm in my kitchen with my laptop. And I thought it's important to say none of what I do would be possible if my 1-year-old was not in nursery 5 days a week. And I think it's important to be honest. We can't do everything. There's only so many hours in the day. So my job combines research and academia, and it has pros and it has cons. On the one hand, every day is different. On the other hand, I am trying to get better at being a clinician and a researcher at the same time. And I recognize I'll never be perfect at both. On the other hand, they reinforce each other, and I find it very stimulating. There are great things about both, which I get to benefit from, but of course I suffer from the negatives too of both clinical and academia. My progression in my career is slower because of doing both, but I consider that a good thing. I get more opportunities to diversify my skills, but I earn less because I'm not progressing to be a consultant psychiatrist as quickly as my peers. I get to teach students, but I don't get as much chance to train junior doctors. And I get to collaborate across centres with really diverse people, but I get less of a chance to really embed within a clinical team. So that's the job I do. And my main bit of advice for juggling, based on my personal experience, is slowly but surely, I got to know myself. I thought about, and I'll tell you the answers for me, but it'd be good to reflect yourself about when you work best, where, how, what you find easy and what you find hard, what you find annoying or upsetting at work, what makes you happy, what you care about, what your values are, and what annoys other people about you. Not so that you can change and adapt yourself to their expectations, but so that you can understand what you're best at. The pictures on the slide, so the bottom right is it's a kind of pop psychology idea, the 4 tendencies, but I find it really helpful. It's about how you respond to your own expectations of yourself and how you respond to the expectations of others. So if you are good at keeping a New Year's resolution and also good at meeting a deadline, you're probably an upholder. If you are great at meeting a deadline, but usually your New Year's resolutions go out the window pretty quickly, you're an obliger. And if you're great at following your own expectations but hate a deadline, you're a questioner. And if you are not great at either, you're a rebel. And knowing this kind of thing about yourself, albeit a little bit frivolous, is quite helpful when you, I have found, encounter conflicts at work or don't quite get on with the way your colleagues approach things. But my answers to these questions are, I know that I work best in the morning, so I get up early, but I don't expect myself to keep working late at night because it doesn't suit me. I know that I do best by far if I have a really diverse week with a mixture of research, teaching, and clinical work. I know that I need deadlines to do my best, but I like to have flexibility so that if I work more on a certain day, I can then borrow time on another day to do something important to me. I find it really hard to start a project, but I find it much easier to edit something I've already started and finish it off because I get a kick out of feeling like I've ticked something off my list. I really dislike being micromanaged. I don't respond well to excessive bureaucracy, but I've chosen research and the NHS, so that was just an error on my part. And I really disproportionately dislike being in a bullying environment at work. And all these slow realizations about myself have helped me to manage my time better and select opportunities that suit me better. I know that I am much happier at work when I can get both short and long-term rewards. That's why clinical and research works well for me. And I love to be able to travel outside of a global pandemic. Over the years, I've clearly identified that what is most important to me is to work in the social determinants of mental health, and that guides everything I do. And the question of what your values are, some people find harder to answer than others. And I put on the previous slide a little online thing about how you identify your values. But I think over the years, I've identified that collaboration, fairness, candor, efficiency, social justice, and lifelong learning matter to me. And these are helpful to guide how I spend my time. Oh, and I annoy people because I can be a bit pedantic and I'm also a bit overcommitted. So sometimes a bit late on things. And these are things I've identified about myself that I want to work on. But how would you get there? I think a lot of it, honestly, is time and making mistakes. But I would suggest being reflective, because doctors have built into our jobs regular appraisal and reflective practice. And I find that very valuable. I therefore use supervision whenever I get it. Often people roll their eyes at having to go to various appraisals and things, but I really try to reflect and learn from my mistakes, basically. Notice patterns when things haven't gone so well, and identify problems if you keep having a certain issue in work, trying to sort of not go for that opportunity the next time because it didn't really work out. Especially in medicine, it's very typical that you would always talk to your peers and your near peers to navigate your career. I don't know how common that is in other professions, but it's just not possible to pass medical exams or jump through the next hoop or get the next job without knowing what the secrets of people just a little bit further ahead are. So I'd really recommend that. Definitely identify, if you have a dream job in sight, find someone with that job and just pin them down for a coffee and their advice about how you get to be them. Building networks, mentoring is the kind of thing you often get told to do, but can be quite hard to really understand. I would say the most important thing is to really build relationships with your peers, because eventually you and your peers will be senior and that will be your network. And make sure your network is diverse, not just all the people who went to the same uni as you, because the more interdisciplinary your network can be and the more countries and contexts they have experience of, the better. Audit your CV. So if you sat down with your CV and thought, there was this thing here that I did that took a really long time and it was okay and I eventually published it, or I did this eventually, but it was quite stressful and took me away from a lot of other things. That would be what I mean. Look at those things and think, next time, maybe I won't choose an opportunity like that. I'll say no. My next slide talks about that. If you are in a position in a job or a university where there is a career service, use it, because those people are absolute experts. And I mentioned one of my values is efficiency. So I really would say there is a podcast on everything now, and really look for things like this. I've got a picture on the right of Squiggly Careers, who are two women who talk about stuff about careers. I've been enjoying those recently, and this book Slay in Your Lane, which is inspiring stories of women of colour. But I thought I'd finish with a few, sorry, I've totally lost track of time, hopefully not too late, a few actual suggestions, practical ones. I've got one of these diaries that has appointments with times in it. That is very deliberate, and it's because it stops me scheduling more than I can reasonably do. I'm really enthusiastic, but sometimes I overcommit. That's why I have that. I use loads of Post-its on my desktop. Basic advice, but it helps me keep track of those jobs that in the past used to just slip down my radar and I would completely forget to do. Again, a bit basic, but there are so many automated ways to save yourself time now, be that referencing software for your academic publications, or going on a course that teaches you how to use headings in Microsoft Word. Sounds kind of ridiculous, but has saved me a lot of time. Control F is my favorite shortcut of all time and will save you from reading an entire paper to find one piece of information. Email, I think, is a total time suck. So if you could do anything with your week, it would be to strategize your email and not just answer them all the way through the day, but find your mental dead time in the week where you are not good for anything and do your emails then, not in your fresh, enthusiastic time of day. Design your day to suit your personality. So like I said, I'm a lark. I work best in the morning. The thing I said about your tendency, I'm an upholder. So I have to think about what helps me to get things done, things like deadlines, and tailor your plans accordingly. I think it's quite a good strategy to figure out things you're just bad at and then work with people who are great at that, because then you complement each other, but you also learn their skills. This is something I only realized from doing a PhD, that becoming specialist at something is incredibly efficient, because instead of what I used to do, which is write a paper on this and write a paper on that, which was two completely different literatures and was a nightmare. If you become a specialist in something, you know the literature, and actually the work is much easier. And I would say, as stressful as it is sometimes carving out time to go on a course, if you find the right course, my experience is it's a great efficiency saver, because the course will teach you everything you need to know and you won't waste time floundering around looking for the resources you need. Last slide is something I know from psychiatry is about boundaries. It's very difficult, especially when you're enthusiastic and want to get a lot of opportunities. It's hard to say no, and it's hard to not be helpful to all people, but that often comes at the expense of your own objectives and deadlines. And that's particularly true, we know, for women. There's a whole literature on women doing more of the academic housekeeping than men. I don't have time to go into more detail, but I would say if you're going to do clinical academia, you have to have a prioritization structure. And I would say clinical stuff has to come first because it has immediate impact on a patient. So it always has to come first if it needs to. My general career strategy has been to say yes to everything in the beginning of my career and slowly learn the power of saying no later on as I had to boundary my time. What's helpful for this is the concept of an opportunity cost. So if I say yes to this thing that sounds quite good, I've then cut off a lot of unknown future opportunities that I'll have to say no to because I'm already committed to that other thing. If you find this really difficult, have a friend who's the same as you and tell each other, oh, I said no to 5 things this week, or make a list of all the things you said no to. That works for some people. And if you find the long game of academia a bit unrewarding, have this thing called a ta-da list. So instead of to do, every time you get something ticked off, keep a list of all the things you've done. I'm finding that quite motivating while I write my thesis. Don't have time really to go into this, but I just wanted to say there are a lot of toxic personalities and behaviors in academia. And if you are unhappy in your job, just have a think about whether you are working with a narcissist, and have a think whether if you pivoted your work into a different direction with a different person, you might be enjoying your work and thereby much more time efficient if that were the case. Keep perspective. Academia and clinical work can feel very overwhelming, and above all, easier said than done. I think a work-life balance is really important. This is a picture of the coffee ceremony that is traditional in Ethiopia. In medicine, it's very common to be so busy that you feel you don't have time for lunch and you're just not going to take a break. It's absolutely vital. I always made mistakes in the afternoons when I had missed lunch. So always take breaks. And if you are someone who won't take a real break because you haven't got an actual holiday planned, I know it's difficult in a pandemic, but I book holidays if I can, because I know when I'm on holiday, I will actually rest. And I think that's really important for a sustainable career that avoids burnout. So thank you very much for your attention. I have no idea how long that was. I'm really sorry. Clearly time management is not my strong suit.
Oh, that was, independently of that, it was absolutely amazing and super useful. I certainly will take on board the tada list and the no list as well. I think that's great. Thank you for that. And I'd now like to invite Bailey Sousa to speak. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful for us all to be here together today. My brain is already expanding with ideas and things I've learned. We've been hearing so much already about the challenges that face us as individuals and ECRs in today's university. And I think about how you're asked to be good at presenting your research to all manner of diverse audiences. Also good on social media and in the mass media, to be good writers, not just in your area of speciality, but also theory and methods. You must be good at managing time, people, budgets, managing research data, research projects, research teams. The demands are endless, and the resources seem to be less and less. And the systems we work in are often rife with inequities, and we, of course, have our own personal challenges, which can have an impact on our well-being. So then, what can be done? Well, I would argue that the first and only place to start is with values. And the more challenges we feel, the more important it is to take a step back, to reflect on our own values and the contribution that we want to make in our work and our life. I've been writing about and thinking about and speaking and teaching about values for many years, but every once in a while I hear a profound story from someone who is truly living into their values. Recently, we hosted a conversation with the Consul General from the US to Canada, and when she was asked about how she was coping with diplomacy in the time of COVID-19, especially when mask wearing and even the pandemic itself has become so politicized, she took a deep breath. She thought for a moment, and then she described how easy it felt in retrospect to make decisions back at the start of the pandemic, when we were all scared of the unknown and lockdowns were upon us. But once things began to open up and we were faced with so many more difficult decisions. What friends do we see? What meetings or events do we attend and when? How big is our bubble? Where do we draw the line? She explained how torn she felt, trying to balance these decisions for herself and her family and her team at work. She did some reflecting and concluded that what she valued most at this time was health and safety. Once she acknowledged those values, decisions became easier. Every decision she measured up against her stated values. For her, once she gave herself permission to stand tall in her values, a weight was lifted and the path became clearer. I have also found this to be so helpful when feeling overwhelmed with too many demands and challenges. Would it be helpful for you in this moment to step back and reflect on your own values? Do you feel crystal clear on what you stand for? So much so that these values could be a guiding light for all of the decisions that you make? If not, using a values inventory is a great place to start. Look at a long list of values and try to pick your top 5 or even 3 most important values. Once you're clear on your values, you'll find it becomes so much easier to identify what success looks like for you. And usually when it feels like we have too many balls in the air, it's because we aren't sure what success actually looks like. So then we keep more balls up there than we actually need or want. In our book, How to Be a Happy Academic, we break down a tool and a process to help you to identify your success indicators. And while I don't have time to dive into that today, I really would encourage you to think about your values first and be clear on what then you're working towards. What does success look like for you in your work and in your life? Once you know that, then you can identify what the priority will be to help you to get there. Priority. Did you know that the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s and means the first thing? But by the year 1900, people started using the word priorities. We reasoned that by changing the word, we could somehow bend reality, and there could somehow be multiple first things. So if there can only be one first thing, one priority, then what is yours? What's the first thing you need to do even today after this session to work towards your own success indicators? Usually when we start to think in this way, then we can see which balls are the important ones and which are the balls that we actually need to drop. But if you're like me, you might find it hard to feel like you are dropping balls. So I have adopted the if it isn't a hell yeah, then it's a no technique. I have this written on the wall in my office, and I use this rubric to help me to decide which things aligned with my priorities are hell yeahs that I should say yes to, or which things are the no's, because they're not going to help me to reach my success indicators. But of course, these decisions are not easy and often require us to really, really harness our own agency to make them. But even when we do feel clear about our values, our success indicators, and our priorities, how do we actually keep to them, especially during challenging times? Roxanne alluded to this already, and I'm going to double down on the answer to this question is boundaries. This term sounds so easy, but of course it is much easier said than done. And for some of us, actually not setting boundaries is the number one factor that contributes to diminished well-being and our inability to be successful. So in the couple of minutes that I have left, I thought I would offer you some of my favorite tips for how you can set better boundaries to really draw the lines that you need. So number 1, consider priority management instead of time management. Time management really has been in vogue for decades, but I actually think that priority management is much more effective because, of course, time is fixed. It's a fixed resource and it cannot really be managed. We all, no matter who we are and what role we have, only have 1,440 minutes in each day. And once those minutes are spent, we cannot get them back. And if we have a quiet day today, we cannot bank that time for tomorrow, even though we wish we could. So instead, think about your priorities and think about how you can manage those within your 1,440 minutes. The best way to do this is, of course, to map your time to your priorities in your diary, in your calendar. For me, if something, I mean anything, isn't in my diary, it does not exist. Now, this level of detail might not work for you, but think about moving the needle even just a little bit in terms of time blocking. So let's say, for example, that your success indicator is to be internationally known in your field, and that to do that, you know that a priority to do this would be you'd have to write more. Well, then writing blocks should appear in your calendar, in your diary, absolutely. Priorities are not something that happens after everything else is done, but they will happen if you proactively schedule for them, which is part of good boundary setting. Number 2, say no more often. Listen to that little voice in your head or that physical reaction that is telling you to say no, and believe this voice. As I said earlier, if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a no. Conversely, if something is a clear no, then do not say yes to begin with. There's some really interesting research that shows that we actually find it easier to say no to buying a new item of clothing at the store than getting rid of a piece of clothing we already have in our closet, even if we no longer wear it. So this is, of course, because we place more value in things that we have already invested in, which is so true too of our work and our other commitments. So think about what things are already in your closet. What are the projects or plans you already have in place that need a no now? And finally, number 3, put clear boundaries around your time thieves. The 2 biggest time thieves in academia are, as you may predict, email and meetings. Thinking through a boundary lens, what new norms could you create for yourself in regards to emails or meetings? Can you set a fixed time once or twice a day so you aren't distracted by emails all day long? Can you give yourself permission to respond to emails within 24 or 48 hours instead of instantaneously? Could you send less email altogether and open a conversation with your team and colleagues about how collectively this could become a norm? Could you have your default meeting times set for most meetings to 30 minutes? And can you put time in your calendar between these meetings for personal wellness, even taking time to meditate or breathe for 5 minutes? So to recap, start first with reflecting on your values before identifying your own success indicators and priorities. Set boundaries to keep to these no matter what. And as Laura Vanderkam says so well, the possibilities are infinite, but time is finite. We are always choosing, so choose well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's all fantastic advice. And I think the struggle is to really live those and implement those suggestions on a day-to-day, but I fully agree, they are fantastic and definitely a way to juggle all the commitments that we're facing. So thank you very much. And now last but absolutely not least, I'd like to invite Zoe Kennedy, please.
Thanks. I'm just going to share some slides. Hopefully you can all, there we go.
Yes, we can see them.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm Zoe Kennedy. I'm the IOPPN Culture, Diversity and Inclusion lead. So what that means is I'm not a researcher. My entire role is focused about creating an inclusive and diverse culture at the IOPPN. And more broadly, supporting work at King's level as well. That kind of keeps changing, and there's a sort of a huge amount of work around there. And more recently, that's also including supporting our researchers and how they do research as well. So not just the environment where they work, but their research as well. I work with a huge number of people. We have over 60 people on our Culture, Diversity and Inclusion self-assessment team, which includes a Vice Dean of Culture, Diversity and Inclusion and a co-chair of our team, as well as departmental representatives, area representatives and champions, and we've also got working groups and networks as well. At IOPPN, what we try and do is see that diversity and inclusion is everybody's responsibility, but what we call the core team, and my role is about trying to provide some of that strategic change and direction. And our representatives make sure that what we're doing locally is being embedded in departments, but also making sure that people within areas and departments have someone to go to and talk to where there are issues. We work across all protector characteristics, we try and work through a intersectional lens, so making sure we're not just looking at race, not just looking at age, not just looking at disability, but looking about how they all connect and interrelate. We also look at the staff and student experience and their life cycle, and thinking about what's needed at the beginning of a career, as well as what's needed at more senior levels. We also make sure that we have a huge number of resources and support available, and we make sure look to be sort of allies and have everyone being allies for everyone. I thought I'd just mention sort of the legal context, and then I'm going to go on to talk about some of the examples of what we've done at IOPPN and King's to support this. So in the UK, there's the Equality Act 2010, and that legally protects people from discrimination in the workplace and in wider society. And it's the framework of protection against direct and indirect discrimination, harassment, victimization in services, public functions, work, educations, associations, transport. And it is the Equalities Act that sets out the 9 protector characteristics, which is age, disability, marriage and civil partnership, gender sexual reassignment, sexual orientation, sex, race, pregnancy and maternity, and one more, I can't remember. I sometimes get them and sometimes I forget one or two of them. In terms of applying the Equality Act at the King's level, so that's generally sits more with the King's as an organisation rather than within my role, but we do make sure that those protected characteristics are there, and that our work around bullying and harassment addresses and incorporates the Equality Act as well. And so now on to some of the initiatives that we've done at the local level to support that diverse and inclusive environment. Last year we launched our Code of Conduct. We've had quite a number of people sign up to it, about 400 when I last looked a couple of months ago. And we also had all of our senior leaders sign up to that as well. And as you can see, there's we make sure that it's covering all of the protected characteristics. And the last one I forgot was religion and belief. And there are 7 principles there that set out the behavioural expectations at the IOPPN, and what people should be doing to create that diverse and inclusive culture and environment. The 7 principles came from our Athena Swan Award when we applied in and were successful in our Silver Award 2 years ago. And it really looks at some of the areas that need specific support. That also includes well-being and equality of opportunity, and there's also a point there for making sure that early career researchers are being supported, they're getting development opportunities and progression as well, because we recognise that that's an area that there's lots of external things happening that influences that experience, and so we need to make sure that within the faculty, early career researchers are being supported with what they need. The next thing that we've done was in our IOPPN 2020 to 2025 strategy, we have a whole section of people and that recognises that people are at the heart of our success, and so our sort of diversity and inclusion work is recognised through the people stream, and so it is right there central to where the IOPPN is aiming to go. The other thing that we've done is with our performance development reviews. We've done a lot of work over the last few years to make sure that citizenship is recognised and equally valued along with research and papers and grants and other areas, and making sure that it's clear that any work for around culture, diversity and inclusion, outreach, and other work around that line is being recognised within our within the performance framework. So that will that's making sure that everyone that's involved in our working groups and our as departmental or area representatives are really being recognised for that work. That has also led to work at the King's level within the academic promotions framework, where if you're applying for promotion, you now need to set out how you're creating an inclusive environment. So it's about embedding the work that people are doing to create an inclusive environment through formalised processes. The other thing that we've done for 2020 and 2021 was to recognise the impact of COVID, and so we adapted the form, made it shorter, but still made sure that people were being able to reflect on their achievements and also set their goals going forward. And what we also did was we included a section, a confidential section that sort of people add to it and then just talk about it with their direct line manager and then remove it from the form before it goes through the sort of other and gets formally submitted. And so what that does is it provides the opportunity for, particularly in relation to COVID, parents and carers to really recognise what impact those responsibilities have had on their work. The next thing we did was, this was also in relation to COVID. What we realised was there was a whole lot of uncertainty right when the pandemic was happening. There's sort of information flying everywhere, and all of that. And so what we did was we created the Community Engagement Corner, which is an online SharePoint page that pulled all of that information into one place. So that was in particularly the kind of college guidance and formalised decisions, but also made sure that we included a whole range of resources and support around well-being, around parents, around carers, and we've also made sure that it's been a really adaptive tool to react to certain things that are happening as well. So, for example, last year with the Black Lives Matter protests, we made sure that we could use the Community Engagement Corner to create a page that had a whole lot of not just resources about the movement, but made sure that we also had links to support to make sure that people who might be being affected by the protests and things that were going on were being linked to that support. Part of COVID, we also King's set out a virtual framework of meetings, and what we did at the IOPPN was we adapted that and then set out our considerate online communications engagement, and what that did, similar to the code of conduct, it sets out those expectations of how people should be interacting online, and it also provides that framework for people who might be experiencing behaviour, online behaviour that may not be appropriate, to really kind of talk to that person or call it out and say, hey, how you interacted on that meeting wasn't in line with these guidelines. Have you seen them? Things like that. At the King's level, another support there is our Carers Career Development Fund. And so what that is it's a fund that any carers can apply for that covers the cost to attend training or conferences that might occur in your days off. So if you're only working part-time, but there is a conference that you really want to attend because it'll have lots of networking or development opportunities, there is a fund that you can apply for to cover childcare costs or other caring costs. And they, in partnership with the Carers Career Development Fund, is the Parent and Carers Fund. It is currently on pause due to COVID, but what this fund is you can apply for up to £10,000 to support your return to work. It's targeted towards researchers and academics, and it's been used in a whole lot of different ways, including paying for a research assistant for a couple of months to support with data analysis or things like that, that will support that researcher or academic to return after a period of leave. The other thing that I was going to mention is the wellbeing days. So at King's have introduced wellbeing days. I think it's 2 days per year, and it's just about if you wake up and you're just going, I can't cope with this, or it's all too much, I just need a day off. There is 2 wellbeing days you can get that are paid and not part of your annual leave. So that was a sort of a whistle-stop tour of some of the initiatives that are happening at IOPPN level and King's that really trying to support that inclusive and diverse culture and community. And I just thought I'd end with a couple of points about how to really support well-being as well. So the first one, and it mirrors some of what some of the other speakers have mentioned. Number one is take leave. Working in academia, you get an awful lot of leave, and I can't tell you how many academics I know and researchers that do not take that leave. Make sure you take it, it's there, you're entitled to it, and if you take leave, make sure you
I don't know if it's just
really
me. Zoe?
yeah.
Hello, you were gone for a second. I think it was a network problem. Would you like to repeat it?
Oh, yeah. So
You're
first,
up a bit. You might want to switch off your video camera, perhaps then that gives you more bandwidth for the audio. Okay, unfortunately, Zoe seems to have dropped the connection. Okay, she's back. Zoe, are you still here? Zoe?
oh,
We
I'm
can
back.
hear you now.
Sorry.
Yeah. You want to finish your last points?
Yes. I won't share my script because I've only got a few. But yeah, take leave, say no, make sure you're talking about your priorities and your workload with your line managers and supervisors and mentors, and really being asking, do I need to do this? Why am I doing this? Ask for, seek out, and use support. It will be there. You might just have to search around a little bit, but it will be there. it might be there in slightly different ways as well. Get involved in networks so they can be really helpful. If, for example, as a parent, you're struggling with one particular element of managing being a parent and working, being involved in networks can help you get that kind of exposure. Oh, it's not just me. And you might pick up some tips as well. And then the final point I had was that it's never too early to lead and work inclusively. So making sure you're reflecting on your practices and the work you're doing, the research you're doing, thinking about, is it inclusive? Am I including everyone, and making sure you're a ally as well. And that's everything that I had. Sorry that my internet had a moment.
Absolutely no problem. I think after 1.5 years of this online environment, I think we're used to being muted or breaking up. So absolutely fine. Thanks, Zoe, for making it work nevertheless. So that actually officially ends our presentations. Thanks to all the speakers for sticking to time and sharing so much in-depth advice. I'd now like to invite all the speakers to switch on their cameras if you want to. And we have already a couple of amazing questions in the chat, many of which I have actually for you as well. So I actually would like to start with Bethan's question, where she was asking, she feels she's just finished out of her PhD and wants to write more papers, but she also has a full-time job. So she asks the question, she struggles to find free time and use the free time to write papers. So is there any advice any of you has for Bethan?
I had some thoughts, and I think because you talked that your job is now in research, and I'd say from my perspective of kind of working from the changing the organization side is talk to your supervisors about how you can build in that writing the papers into your job. It will probably help if you can argue about why you publishing a paper will support that team or that organization, but kind of don't just assume that because it's working is, and you shouldn't be getting support from that within your role, and it being within your kind of paid time rather than personal time.
Any other suggestions that perhaps some of you may have?
I would just say on a pragmatic level, I mentioned that I find it hard to start things and easier to finish them. So I've learned over the years that if I do a really basic but procedural task related to something like writing a paper, like open the Word document and populate the headings and format it the way the journal I'm targeting at wants me to. Once I have a shell of a Word document, I find turning something like a PhD chapter into a paper a lot less daunting, and that's my trait.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Roxanne.
Yeah, I often give this exactly this similar sort of advice, that it's much easier to write the method than anything else in a paper. So, start with something that's easy to write. But I think it goes back to the point that Bailey was making earlier too about prioritization. So, Zoe, I take your point about, seeing if you can fit it into your work. But there are lots of different types of research jobs, and some are very focused, and you're just not able to fit that into your role. So I guess it comes back to what's your priority. If your priority is trying to, establish yourself in a research career, ultimately you're going to have to publish. That's one of our primary indicators of performance, right? So I think using that and trying to find, some of those little kind of successes along the way, like writing the method and getting the headings and selecting the journal you want to publish in, can help in kind of getting you started and moving forwards on that. And perhaps picking the paper that's easiest to do first.
Great suggestion. anyone else, or before we move on to the next question? No? Brilliant. We also have a question from Emma, and a colleague, Helen, also posted her advice already into the chat. But just to raise the question, when thinking about juggling a project, Emma sometimes struggles to know how many projects to take on that are not, for example, directly linked to her PhD, but are useful for the wider career that she has intended to. Do you have any suggestion for this, or perhaps you could recommend 1 or 2 days per week that are not directly related to your main academic project? Any advice?
Well, I would say I think I saw a meme about this. It's the one where there's, well, I won't describe the meme, but basically it's the point that you're working really in depth on something that is nearly done. And then you see these shiny things off in your peripheral vision that offer you the opportunity to do something else. And I'm extremely susceptible to this kind of thing. And on the one hand, I would really beat myself up and say I take on too much and I'm too busy and I'm neglecting my other priorities. On the other hand, it is quite important to have different things completing at different times. So it's not always a bad thing to say yes to other things that are not directly related, as the questioner has highlighted. So I think some of that is about finding your unique balance. Some people become much more efficient because they're busy. And so having a few more commitments actually reduces wasted procrastination time. And other people just get so stressed with too many commitments and it's really counterproductive. So I would suggest making a list of all the ones available to you, and perhaps, as Bailey said, comparing it against your values and which of them, even in an indirect way, is going to progress your long-term goals, and which of them are nice to have, but probably in the grand scheme of your hopes and plans, not going to make a difference.
And I'd add to that, perhaps just thinking strategically too. So I think you had put down 2 examples, so teaching and marking. Now, I don't know what your kind of KPIs are in the UK, but there's no KPI for marking in Australia. There is a KPI around teaching. Right? So it's thinking about, if you don't have experience in teaching and you want to progress in an academic career, you probably will need that kind of experience at least. So taking some of that on, probably good. Marking, maybe good for finances, probably not going to help you tick any boxes. But of course, it depends on the setting that you would work on. So thinking strategically about what sorts of things are going to help you in the long run in terms of your career.
Bailey, I saw you beforehand switching off your mic, switching on your mic. You wanted to say something, or should we move on?
I mean, I think the points are covered great.
Yeah,
you know, I love what Roxanne said about the shiny balls. I think that is so true, that those are the things that we're drawn to. And I think it's really hard to step back, like you were saying, Roxanne, to really say, is this a shiny ball? Is this something that's really, you know, is this really going to help me? You know, like the point about marking, or is this something that just sounds fun or interesting? I mean, at some points in our career, we can do the fun, interesting things. And at other points, we need to really buckle down on, you know, getting the PhD done or meeting that specific goal. So I think really looking critically at our choices is so important.
Thank you. We have a question on being able to say no, and one of the attendees pointed to a really nice science advice article that I highly recommend everyone to open up today. But do you have any, you know, suggestion how to politely say no? Perhaps also, Naima, you can, you know, with lived experience, you know, sometimes you may feel not like at the right moment to do a certain task. So could you share any advice on how to be, you know, assertive, but, you know, still able to come across with your point?
Okay. I think you kind of know what I'm going to say, all of you guys. I've had to learn the hard way. I kind of burnt out. I've been through the burnt out. I've got medical and I've got mental health and physical health problems now because I didn't say no for a very long time. So now I kind of have to listen to my body. I have no choice. And I would not recommend this on anyone. So now I have to listen to my body before I give an answer. and I'm very I'm very direct. I'm not rude or anything, but I basically say, if I know in my heart it's not something I want to do, I'll just say, like, look, I can't commit to that. I can't commit to it. It's, you know, it's not something I'm passionate about, or I know that I won't be able to give it 100% and I don't want to let you down. You probably find somebody else that can do a better job, you know, do it justice more than I can, you know. And people know that with me as well. I mean, I do a lot of voluntary work, and I do a lot of I'm doing a lot of I've set up my own we've set up a charity group with a number of friends now, a mental health charity group, crafting group for women that have got mental health, and we're helping other vulnerable people. And I know it's not the same as academia, but the shiny balls thing, I have that problem already all the time. I know it's not on the same academia thing, but I have that problem. And yeah, you have to know what your passion is. It's the same kind of thing, but in a very different way. It's the same type of thing, but you have to, you don't want to get to the point where I am now. And you know what, all the things that you said, it's really sound advice. You don't want to get to the point where I am now, where you have to listen to your body, and you have to, your main concern is your mental health and your physical health. And with PTSD, as you all are probably very well aware, you have to manage it. It's a lifelong condition, you have to manage it. So my main priority when I get up in the morning is doing a self-check. And I think everyone has to do that, whether you have a mental health problem or not. I think at our age now, people do develop, you have physical, a lot of us have physical health problems. And I think even when you're in a stressful 9-to-5 job, you will have physical health problems the older you get. So it is a case of you have to do a self-check. When you wake up in the morning and throughout the day, you have to do a self-check. And mindfulness it plays a massive part as you grow up as an adult. You need to do that. And I think all the points that you raised are really valid.
Thank you so much, Naima, and especially your, your suggestion to simply say I can't give 100% on this, and I'd rather not let you down is a fantastic phrase to use. I think that can be very helpful. And perhaps Zoe, from a legal perspective, for a diversity inclusion perspective, because the attendee was also saying, postdocs may find it hard to say no to a superior. Is there any way, if you're always asked to do something and you feel obliged to say yes, how can they deal with it? How can they escalate things?
I think that's a really difficult one, because so often it can really depend on the situation. So one of the things that we've been focusing at as a team is about trying to provide the frameworks there that people can use. So for example, and sometimes some of this kind of pressure can sometimes go into bullying and harassment, which is just not acceptable. And it can be really hard to call out that behaviour. So what we've done with the sort of code of conduct, with setting out those expectations, is that someone can call out that behaviour without making it personal, just saying, hey, have you seen the code of conduct? I don't think what you said is really in line with the code of conduct. So it kind of takes it away from being that kind of personal challenge to being there is a framework, and that's the expectations of what we're setting at AOPPN. In terms of saying no, we're trying to do sort of similar things, but it can be really difficult because sometimes kind of if you're being asked to do something, making sure that you're aware of like the bigger the bigger picture of it and the context around it. And I don't think we're always good at really explaining why are we asking someone to do this all the time. We've had statements from our executive dean and senior leadership team about saying you can say no and trying to give people permission, but again, that it's a really difficult thing in practice. One of the other things that I've been doing is about through the performance development review cycle, encouraging the reviewers to really be asking the reviewees, why are you doing this? Do you really need to be doing this? How does this fit into with your career trajectory and things like that, so that you're kind of it's not just about the individual saying no, but it's about the senior person kind of saying, why are you doing this? And I think that, again, the last thing is just about, if you keep trying to say no and no one, and you keep kind of, that's not being heard or being listened to, it depends on the situation and things like that, but it might be straying into bullying and harassment and being against our kind of inclusive and diverse environment that we're kind of striving for. And so there will be support around that. So you can go and talk to, there might be confidential advisors or a D&I rep or other people you can go and talk to, where you can kind of talk about the context of the scenario or the situation, and get more kind of nuanced support about how to manage that. Hopefully that's helpful. I know I've jumped around a little bit there.
Sorry, doing the usual thing of being muted and talk. No, that was really helpful. And so is it also okay potentially if people contact you, if they have any questions like around that issue?
Yeah, definitely. I can be really slow on email because I kind of push it to the end to do some of the bigger things, but do feel free to contact me.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We have another question. Well, we have a couple of more, which is good. Another question is around like the pandemic, and now that everything has shifted online, and I actually would agree personally as well, it is actually making juggling commitments quite easy because you're now more in charge of your time. I certainly feel like that as well than ever before. And I wondered, the person asking the question was wondering if any of you have any experience over the past year about like how this is going to happen when things opening up again. How will that, impact our way of juggling things in the future? I guess it's a really difficult question to answer because nobody of us can look into the future. But do you have any? Have you seen any research, or have you any gut feeling of how this will work out and play out?
Perhaps I can comment, because in some ways, perhaps we are a little bit in the future here in Brisbane. We've been very, 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 very fortunate where we've had very few cases of COVID. So, we had, sort of the lockdowns early last year when everybody had their first wave. But since then, life has pretty much been pretty normal. All our activities are back to normal. Every now and again, we have a handful of cases and we get all excited about tracing every single movement. But otherwise, life is pretty normal in terms of our day-to-day activities. But in our work environment, I think things have certainly shifted. For example, at my university, all lectures are still being Zoomed. So tutorials, which are smaller group, students have a choice of doing face-to-face or via Zoom, but all large lectures are held via Zoom. And to be honest, I can't see that changing. I think that's going to be the adopted practice into the future. Despite the fact that we can all meet in person, more or less, at our universities, I probably spend 2/3 of my meetings as Zoom meetings rather than as in-person meetings, because everybody's much more flexible and it's become much more commonplace to do so. You save 10 minutes walking across campus if you don't have to, if you can just Zoom in rather than walk to the meeting. Probably not so good for our, step counts and our physical well-being, but certainly much better from a time management perspective. So in some ways, I think a lot of these changes are probably here to stay. You get that little burst of excitement when you first start seeing people in person again, and you get excited and you go, okay, well, that was nice, but I don't have to do that all the time now. I can do that when it suits. But of course, it'll probably depend on the work environment too, I imagine, and how flexible your individual employers are going to be in that context.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm considerate of the time, and I want to address the last two questions. One of them is from Anna, who is asking, for meetings with supervisor where, there could be a lot of pressure as well with juggling commitments. How do you communicate, more towards this environment as a peer rather than a student, which I think is particularly difficult when one is a female ECR. So any suggestions around that? And the other question from Bethan was specifically to you, Naima. If you're happy to answer it, if you could mention kind of how the workplace is responding to, PTSD in your job, and could you give any practical examples around that? So Any takers for the other question while Naima is perhaps answering the first one, if she's comfortable with that?
Okay, with the PTSD, I have flashbacks. Mine are a bit kind of weird. I have kind of verbal ones. So I've had EMDR therapy, and I kind of cover them up a bit. So if I feel, because I'm more in tune with my body, so I kind of feel when I'm going slightly downhill. So I kind of excuse myself and I leave the room. And if I'm in a session, if I'm visiting a center, or if I'm about to have an interview, if I'm just about to interview someone, I'll actually phone up the interviewer if it's in COVID, or if it's not COVID, if it's another reason. There was one incident recently it was just before COVID, where I got on a train and I was triggered. I saw somebody that basically sexually advanced me at a workplace a year before. And I had a massive PTSD attack and was on train at the time. So I phoned up a colleague and I got off the next train station. I had to calm myself down, and I phoned up the relevant women's centre in Coventry, and I actually told them that, look, I need some time out. And the person was very good. The person I had to interview, the lady, she waited another half an hour or so, and I basically walked. It was quite close. I got off at Coventry and I walked to the venue to help myself calm down, and I was okay by the time I got there. So I work around it. So I'm a lot better. And I phoned up the company that I was working for, and they understood, and they told me that, look, just take some time out and don't beat yourself up. So they're very understanding. And when I phoned up, when I'm ill and I've got deadlines, they actually extend the deadline, and they just tell me it's fine, we'll pay you. It's just take it off as a sick day. So it's brilliant. And like I told you when I was doing my talk, my presentation, I've had days where I've had a proper meltdown because I thought, if I didn't want to tell them that I was sick, because I thought, I've had bad experiences before. I've literally been sacked. I've had 2 days where I've had a migraine. I had a job where I was going in working on a computer, and they just sacked me because I couldn't come in for 2 days because I couldn't see the screen because I was getting migraines. I was getting shimmering. And they sacked me on the second day because I phoned up to say I was sick, and they said, don't come in tomorrow, and they sacked me. And that's happened on more than one occasion for very different reasons. Another time I was working with a cryostat, and I was cutting cells in the laboratory, and I was sacked for the same reason. I was getting headaches with a cold, different things. Or I'm having PTSD attacks around men in the workplace because I've had sexual, how do you word it? I've basically had sexual harassment at work on more than one occasion, serious sexual harassment at work. So that, yeah, and it's gone on for like 2-3 years, and I've had police involved and they've done nothing. We've got anti-stalking laws now, but I'm just trying to give you an indication of what's actually caused it and why. So yeah, but this workplace are really good. They work around people that have been through trauma and have got disabilities and mental health and physical health. So it's been brilliant. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Or
I hope so. For the person that asked the question, perhaps if you want to clarify, if you don't, if that answered your question. In the meantime, perhaps briefly, because I know we are out of time.
Yeah. Sorry.
Any advice for the person that asked the question on like how to talk to the PhD supervisor more like a peer or a student than a student? Difficult one.
Was that to someone else, not me?
Anyone that feels like they haven't perhaps some advice or guidance around this?
I suppose of course, it's incredibly difficult. There are a lot of parameters. It will depend if the person sounded like they were 3 years into their PhD. So there'll be quite a lot of existing dynamics about how you interact already. But, and my supervisors are fantastic. So I recognize that sometimes supervisors might have a more traditional or hierarchical approach that you have to try to surreptitiously adjust. I suppose what works quite well for me is that I am the one who sets the agenda for the supervision, and I should send the agenda in advance and usually forget, but what I do is lead the discussion, and I start with, we have this hour, what are we going to cover? And it's directed by me, and that does give me a lot of autonomy to guide what we discuss. And then if there was something perhaps of the sort that Naima was mentioning, something personal or occupational that was important to me, I could then also insert that into the agenda. Whereas if you go to a supervision a little bit passively, not knowing what your sort of boss person is going to say, that's a lot more anxiety provoking. So that works well for me. I have had supervisors in the past where it wasn't very formalized when it was supervision and when it was something else, and perhaps a slightly more transparent approach to diarising and Zoom scheduling the calendar and calling it supervision when it is supervision, and distinguishing that from other tasks in your role might also mean you get more from supervision than when the boundaries get blurred.
That's fantastic advice, Roxanne. And I think because we're also running out of time, I think we sadly have to leave it at that. But before we officially end this seminar, I just want to say again a huge thanks to all the fantastic speakers today, Alina, Bailey, Naima, Roxanne, and Zoe. Everyone, a huge round of digital applause to you, especially for those that woke up really early, stayed up very late, and for all of you who had to, also take out time during the daytime. So really a huge thanks, a round of applause. I just want to officially say to the audience, please feel free to rewatch the video. It will be put online onto our website. And also that there's an upcoming webinar in September on how to engage with publishers, if you're interested on that. That will happen in mid-September. And there's also a survey that Anjuli posted on how you felt this seminar went, that we would really encourage you to fill in, so we know better kind of what your interests are and how we can address the concerns of the ECR community better in the future. So again, a huge thanks to the speakers. Really can't appreciate your input enough. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining the Violence, Abuse and Mental Health Network ECR series. And yeah, I think the speakers are probably also hopefully open to be contacted in the future. And yeah, hopefully we shall see each other very, very soon, perhaps in person or again online.